Amongst the plethora of objets d'art that filled Bloomsbury Mansion, most prized by Henry, the Right Honourable 8th Earl of Bloomsbury, were the statues that decorated the opulent vaulted dining room, effigies of his previous 7 wives, cast in Italian marble. As large and as imposing as each woman had been in life, they stood on lofty platforms that encircled the dining table and glared down upon the diners, as if to reproach them for the sin of gluttony. Sybil, my dear maternal cousin and 8th wife to the Earl in question, had written to me requesting I visit, whilst tearfully explaining that she had taken to the habit of feigning tiredness in order to excuse her wifely duties and eat in her room rather than at table, so oppressed was she by the constant scrutiny of the unwelcome observers. I had to wonder, as I now stood before her, if she was in fact eating at all, for the bonny bride to whom I had served as maid of honour on her wedding day several months before now looked as thin and gaunt as a twig that would snap if confronted by the gentlest gust of wind. I had wondered, in prior months, how Sybil would fare being married to a man so much older than she, and he being already widow to 7. I feared it was not a love match on her part, but that the betrothal had been necessitated by the reduced fortunes that had befallen her upon her own father's death, and my concern, in the event, was to prove entirely warranted. I had been invited to stay at Gloomsbury over Christmas upon my return from taking the grand tour of Europe in my 21st year. I was to be but one of a number of guests who were due to partake in that festive celebration, though I was to arrive a few days in advance of all others. Sybil, as mistress of the house, knowing she would be forced to oversee proceedings in the dining-room, thanked me heartily for my presence, which, though it could not overcome her trepidation, could at least assure her that she was not alone in it. The situation seemed to cause her the utmost distress, and as it appeared the Earl valued his morbid collection more than his bride's happiness and was unwilling to remove the source of her anguish, it was perhaps not unwarranted. I had not long arrived, that first cold and frosty December's evening, when Sybil led me by candlelight and a cold, bony hand into that chamber of horrors, so as to see what affrighted her so. I shuddered involuntarily as I gazed up and beheld the faces not of women, but of ghouls. Every countenance was horrible to behold, resembling as they did ones who had risen from the grave. My laughter was tinged with hysteria. It must be a trick of the light, surely! No, my dear Agatha, Sybil replied in a flat, defeated voice. My predecessors regard us terribly, albeit through blind, marble eyes. Tears sparkled on her lashes. I am convinced they will be the death of me. It was at that moment I fancied I saw the statue of the first Countess blink its sightless eyes and then move its lips, but dismissed the notion in the instant as an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. I clung on to the hope that, at length, I might be able to help my own dear cousin conquer her fears. Yet even I was not convinced. Sybil turned towards the door. Come, Agatha, let us leave this fearful chamber. As we turned to leave, however, unable to escape her destiny, there came a great rumble and a tremor underfoot, causing the figures to totter on their pedestals, and, as I watched, mortified, the ghastly statue that wore the most malevolent visage of all tumbled forward from its plinth, landing squarely upon Sybil's fragile frame. The weight, casting her down, laid her flat and prostrate beneath it, crushed to death, never to rise again. Covered in her blood splatter, I shrieked in horror and despair until servants came and restrained me in my grief. Henry was absent, but due to return on the morrow from his weekday duties at the Cabinet Office, and a telegram was sent to hasten his return. Unable to sleep, I lay abed all the livelong night, awaiting his arrival, and grew increasingly agitated and morose. I ran from my room to meet Henry at the door upon his early return the next morning, and could barely conceal my rage. Any greeting he might normally have proffered clearly froze on his lips as he stared, wide-eyed, upon my livid countenance. "Your wife is dead," I announced. Dead?" he stuttered. "Yes, crushed to death by one of your beloved statues." His face turned ghostly pale. "And is it damaged at all?" he inquired. I reached out both hands then, and grasping him around the throat, I shook him until his teeth rattled. "Is it damaged? Is it damaged? Good God, man! Your wife is dead, and your concern is for the object that killed her?" It took the butler and several attendants a good 10 minutes to drag me off him, by which time he was purple in the face and rendered unconscious. Henry, having been carried up to his boudoir, only Mrs. Crabbe, the housekeeper, appeared untouched by such a display of violent emotion, and calmly departed to send word for the doctor and local constabulary to attend. I waited patiently in my room as hours passed. One of the housemaids finally appeared with afternoon tea on a tray, and confided, "This is history repeating itself, miss. I knew that fateful statue would cause the death of our charming young mistress. It has, as the young lady truly observed, God rest her soul, an indescribable air of evil which penetrates the soul, so that I too cannot bear to look on it without aversion. It's a wonder the master gives it house room." "I concur with your opinion," I replied. "Why does he indeed?" "I believe 'tis for the remembrance of a terrible impression produced on his mind by his first wife on her deathbed." "Oh, pray, relate it to me," I beseeched her. "This remembrance," said she, "resembles a little too closely the one you have so recently experienced. Permit me, therefore—" There was a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Crabbe, who gestured for the housemaid to leave, and informed me that a Chief Inspector Moody wished to see me. Showing him in, Mrs. Crabbe herself exited sideways. The inspector regarded me very gravely. "Miss Agatha Emmeline Bullstrode?" "I am." "You will be relieved to learn that the Earl does not wish to press charges for your vicious and unwarranted attempt upon his life." I nodded. "However, I am arresting you for the murder of your maternal cousin, Countess Sybil Edith Gloomsbury, on that grounds that on the evening of Friday 14th of December 1892 you did, with malice aforethought, wilfully cause her death by means of a heavy object." I woke from my fainting spell some time later to find myself lying on a metal cot in a cold, damp cell at the local county jail. This was shortly before being transported to a similar dwelling in London. The courts acted quickly, and despite my vociferous protestations of innocence from the dock, I was swiftly found guilty of the crime of which I was accused and sentenced to an ignominious death by hanging, with no possibility of parole. Whilst my supporters on the outside gathered signatures to petition the Home Secretary for clemency, I had little hope of a successful outcome, not least because the Home Secretary is Henry, 8th Earl of Gloomsbury. And so I will make my peace with my Maker and await the inevitable. I had an unexpected visitor yesterday in the form of the now heavily pregnant housemaid who, having been subsequently dismissed from service, had made her way on foot from under the railway arches where she now resides to my condemned cell, as she had felt obliged to finish the tale she had begun on that fateful afternoon and perhaps provide me with the explanation I so longed for. It transpired that Sybil was not the first to die in such hideous circumstances, 6 of her predecessors having suffered the same fate, though there had been no witnesses on those occasions, such as in Sybil's, and those fatalities had all been successfully explained away by means of a number of creative and imaginative scenarios. No sooner had a victim been smoked down, but an effigy had been commissioned and erected alongside the others, as if to maintain the illusion of the Earl's affection. Sybil herself now numbered amongst them. It was Mrs. Crabbe who let slip to the housemaid one night when she was on the gin that the first Countess Gloomsbury, a malicious old trout by all accounts, though a woman of both great wealth and ill health, had commissioned the first, her own statue, on the understanding that if she were to die before her husband, the statue would keep watch over him on her behalf, and should he dare to damage or remove it, she would take her revenge upon him from the grave. It seemed that she had so far satisfied her evil nature with the disposal of her successors. The tale, I knew of course, would be regarded as hearsay at best, and supernatural poppycock at worst, and either way be inadmissible in court, but I had no doubt of its veracity, and if it was fear of his own mortality that kept Henry from attesting to my innocence, then I would be sure to have my revenge. I thanked the housemaid heartily with a note of promise to the tune of £50, and with a letter to take to my solicitor requesting that he honour the note and take all necessary measures to render the unhappy woman with lodgings and all due care and attention. I then sent for a renowned consulting detective and instructed him to find 2 artful vagabonds to go to the Gloomsbury mansion under cover of the night, and by any means, fair or foul, destroy the statue of the Countess. Having reported back and confirmed the deed was done, I awaited the morning paper and was not disappointed. Henry, it was reported, had died in his bed when the ceiling collapsed unexpectedly, rendering him squashed to death in hideous and ignoble fashion. But, hark! I hear the minister has come to give me confession. I shall die today, a murderer, but comforted by the knowledge that it is not for the murder of which I am accused. I'm coming, Sybil. You can rest easy now, my dearest.